Jordan Muck is the lead pastor at Community Gospel Church in Bremen, Indiana. He's also the founder of Reconstructing the Redeemed Ministries, and recently has been appointed as the chaplain to the police department. Good to have you with us, sir.
Kevin, how are you?
It's been a little while, and I see you've got some new footwear there. I don't know if we can catch a shot of that there. There it is, right there.
You like that?
Yeah.
I don't like it at all.
Now, you told us the story. It's been icy. We're in the middle of winter here, and you actually slipped.
Yep.
But boy, talk about that's going far beyond twisting your ankle.
It is. I was getting out of my truck, and on the way back to the front door in my house, and slipped on the ice, broke the ankle, traveled. They said the pressure from breaking the ankle traveled up my leg and broke the fibula on the other side.
And you were carrying a couple dozen donuts.
I had two dozen
for your
donuts.
brothers in blue.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, and a cup of coffee for myself.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that the donuts were for a special occasion.
Yeah,
you guys just finished up your...
yeah, we got what they call OC certification, so they spray you with pepper spray, because you know you got to
capsicum.
You got to get sprayed with capsicum before you can. You
so
can carry
the
it.
mace pepper spray.
Yeah.
So before you carry it, before the policemen carry it, they got to get sprayed with it.
Yep.
And why did you then, as a chaplain, have to get sprayed with it too?
Well, I'm on the reserves as well.
Okay.
So a chaplain is one thing, and then the reserves is a different area too. So what they'll do is you have to go through all of it. I mean, if you want to serve on the force. So
So they get tased as well?
We don't carry tasers, so they don't tase us.
Thank
we
God.
We don't carry tasers as reserves, I should say.
Right.
The officers do.
The officers do, though.
And they're always ready to tase you. I mean, they'll tase you whenever they, you know, every time I walk in the department, they're like, "You want a little boost?" I'm like, "No, it's all right. I got my boost this morning, cup of coffee and the Bible, I'm done."
We want to kind of focus on the topic of chaplaincy in the police force. We know that, you know, whether it's policemen, firemen, EMTs, first responders in general, very high stress positions, high stress responsibilities, you know, and people running away from danger, they're kind of having to run towards it. And that kind of stress has a huge impact on them personally, has a huge impact on their home life, has a huge impact in the way they relate to other people and other children and just people in general. So I would imagine what you do as a chaplain really brings a lot to the table in helping to allow these guys and these ladies to deal with the adversity and the intensity of the circumstances that they encounter. So why did you become a chaplain, and what's it been like for these few months that you've been serving in that capacity?
Right. Well, I've always said if I wasn't in the ministry, I'd be in law enforcement. There's so many parallels between the two, and these guys are one step away from really being in the ministry. If you think about it, they work with people in problems and in crisis, and they just do it on a whole different level than we do. They have the opportunity, you know, to use some different means with people that we don't use in the church world, and so. The reason why it was so appealing to me was when I was in high school, I had a bunch of buddies that went into the National Guard, and they wanted me to go, and I just didn't want to go at that time. And then watching them go and get from military police to regular police and listening to what they're doing and having the opportunity to kind of see what they do and see how parallel it was to ministry. It's like, man, how can I get involved with that? And one thing led to another, some conversations with some people. And then before I knew it, I was working with St. Joe County. I went from St. Joe County to Marshall County, and it just really manifested itself where the prayer always was, if we can merge the two, I would love to merge the two. And it just kind of happened. So,
Jordan, what would you like for the general public, our viewers, to know about police officers? Because if you watch the news, you know, they're in the news, one or several bad situations, and then the entire police force across the country gets painted broadly and badly with a brush. So how would you respond to that? What would you like for us to know about police officers?
Right. Well, the brothers in blue would always say that they're people too, you know? And when we talk to those guys, they talk like normal people. They just have a different position than what we have, and that's working with the general public. And, you know, the general public needs to see first and foremost that these guys are people. They're not machines. They're not robots. High stress is, is very, very relevant, very, very real to them. But the second thing is there's two sides of every coin. And so media can spin and twist things, and they can make it look one way. And what's sad is, even with our smartphones and the things that we have in our pockets that are able to record, we can push that record button that looks away to us. But officers are trained, and they go through specific training and make sure that they know what they're doing is the best. Now, are there some people out there that, are going to be...
Let's say bad apples.
Yeah, bad apples, absolutely. There's some bad pastors out there. We wouldn't say that out loud, so we can just edit that out if we want. But we look over at the police world, and we understand that once you're behind the curtain a little bit, you realize there's two sides to every story, and officers always do things with intent, and their judgment is a little sharper than the average person's because they deal with it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So before you look at that internet clip or that hot topic issue, understand that an officer made a conscious decision, and there's probably another side to the story. So before we go down that rabbit trail, we need to really look at it.
Whether it's cases in Florida or in Ferguson or New York or wherever, it would be wonderful if the rabid feasting on sensationality that's done by the media to rush to judgment, to put a narrative out there. It'd be wonderful if there was a pushback on it. Say, well, let's find out what the facts are. Let's let this thing play out, and then we can make judgment rather than rush to a judgment and then have to backtrack or not backtrack and just let the damage be done. You know?
But you're not going to see that because it doesn't sell.
Right.
I mean, and we know that in the Christian world, and that's why I said there's so many parallels between the two, because good doesn't sell to a community that's saturated in sin. And so something that we have to look at is to say, even as Christians, to say there's another side to this, and I don't know it. Romans 13, I got to trust that those people who've been put into positions of power have that responsibility and are carrying out that responsibility well.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Romans 13 because I know you're preaching a series on that now, and that really does speak to, I mean, if you put, if we want to jump into Paul's shoes, or we want to jump into the church in Rome's shoes, or the early church's shoes when it comes to reading those passages, talk about being under the thumb of oppression or under the thumb of a dictator or under the thumb of tyranny and abuse of authority. If you were a Jew or a Christian in that day and age, you knew what that experience was like, but yet Paul goes to say to the church back then how we ought to interact with the authorities that are over and above us. And I would say that certainly has to apply to us today.
Right, and I think it's twofold. That's a faith and a trust issue, And I think when we talk to people, whether it's the pastor side or the police officer side, one of the questions that we come back to is, how much do you trust and put your faith in the people who are in these positions of power? Not just them, but your Creator, the God of the universe, who is still in control. Because we know, things are manifesting themselves that we look at and we go, man, God, I don't really like this a whole lot. We have to put our faith in the fact and trust God that He does know what He's doing. He wants His people to pray, but at the same time, He wants His people to participate as well. I mean, how many of those church meetings have we had where we're asking people for feedback and they don't show up? And I think the same is with law enforcement too. You'd be amazed at how many cops do listen and do pay attention to the people. They work with them on a 24/7 basis. And so they know what's going on. And it's interesting, if we were to be real and relevant about it, to sit back and say, well, what do you think? And that's something that's just not happening in our society a whole lot, is you don't see the microphone get turned on a police officer and say, hey, what do you think about what's going on? And he's going to be kind of reserved about that because, again, it doesn't sell and the truth isn't popular. It gets rejected a lot.
Well, Jordan, what do you say also to, like, for instance, the situation in Ferguson, where I saw, Christians, they were on opposite sides of the, of the conversation. Some, wanted to demonize all of the police officers. Some are in support of the police officers. And it almost looks like a racial issue because of it. So as a pastor and a chaplain for the police, I mean, how do you even begin to approach that on a Sunday morning?
I think sometimes we have to look at people and understand there's always an issue below the surface. So when you're talking to a person, I mean, how many times as pastors have we been in our congregations where people will come up to us and say, I don't like the music this morning. And what happened in reality was they got in an argument, you know, in their car with their spouse, or their kids are going crazy, you know, the whole 9 yards. And this is just something that they're venting on. And so we have to see what is really true and what is just, you know, coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when we look at some of those situations on the internet or read the headlines or whatever, some of those people, are they venting or is there truth to it? And there could be both, you know. But the nice thing to know about law enforcement and what's happening in our world today is those guys are really, you know, sifting through that information and material to make sure they're doing what's best for the community, which again is why it's so parallel being in the ministry and being in law enforcement is we want to see our communities thrive, but we also want to see our people follow leadership and follow leadership well.
Thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us today on Harvest. To connect with Pastor Jordan, you can go to Jordan Muck, M-U-C-K, that's his last name, .com, or as always, you can go to our website, harvest-tv.com, click on Show Info. You'll find an easy way to link back to Pastor Jordan's site.